On a granite hill, walls rise without mortar, stone upon stone. In 1871, a European called them foreign. Shards of Chinese porcelain in the dust point homeward. How can both be true? Across the Zimbabwean plateau, from Great Zimbabwe to Kami, Dodo, and Nailtail, more than 200 dry stone complexes testify to a civilization that prospered between the 11th and 15th centuries. The most expansive, Great Zimbabwe, is a World Heritage Site. Its granite walls are laid without mortar, with courses so regular they cast their own shade. For decades the site sat at the crossroads of ideology. Colonial Rhodesia leveraged a racist diffusionist myth, the so-called Hamitic idea, to deny an African origin and to underpin claims of legitimacy. While that story served politics, it distorted the past. Scientific work eventually pushed back, but the damage to layers and reputations was real. Today, the questions sharpen rather than fade. Who were the builders of these walls? And how did their society mobilize labor, wealth, and belief to raise so much stone? What roles did these enclosures play? And how did a capital of this scale rise and then relinquish power to new centers like Mutapa? The stones are silent, the evidence is not. Follow the trail the walls left behind. Masonry styles tied to local granite, and dates cluster between 1100 and 1450. Imports from India, Persia, and China turn up in the soil, but they trace trade, not origin. Stone birds carved in steatite hint at kingship and ritual. A network of sister sites sketches a political geography. As the clues align, a picture of governance emerges, layered and sacred, yet still without a written record. Then comes the puzzle of decline and migration of power. By the end, myths fall away, and the people behind the stone take their place, on their own terms. Picture the first recorded European arrival in 1871. Karl Mausch walks beneath walls of cut granite that hold their line without a mortar. He looks up, and he does not see the plateau or its people. He sees the Queen of Sheba. He writes a foreign story onto local stone. In 1891, J. Theodore Bent surveys the ruins, already primed to confirm an outside origin. Early trenches bite through layers that a later generation would have sifted with care. In the early 20th century, Richard Nicklin Hall clears debris, destroying stratigraphy that could have answered basic questions. The urge was to prove a myth, not to test a hypothesis. Then the frame shifts. In 1905, David Randall Meekiver reads the walls and the pottery differently. He finds no need for Phoenicians. In the 1920s, Gertrude Cadden Thompson applies stratigraphy and comparison. Her conclusion in 1931 is direct. The builders were African, the culture indigenous, linked to the ancestors of the Shona. It is not a flourish, it is a finding. By the 1960s and 1970s, Peter Garlake and others refine the chronology. Occupation deepens in the 12th century and surges to a 13th to 15th century apex. Granite is split from nearby outcrops. Courses shift from rough to regular over time. The site is not a lone wonder. It is the largest point on a constellation. Yet something does not fit the old frame. Glass beads that traveled the Indian Ocean lie beside iron slag from local furnaces. Steatite birds watch from the hill complex. The story of foreign builders begins to unravel, but a harder question appears. If this place is indigenous and vast, what social engine powered it? Start with the rocks. Great Zimbabwe's walls are dry stone, their blocks quarried from local granite. The stone fractures along natural lines, encouraging regular faces. Masons learn to read that fracture, then to stack with a precision that tightens joints and smooths curves. Over phases identified by masonry styles and stratigraphy, the walls grow more refined. This is a local craft with a long apprenticeship, not an imported kit. Fix the time. Radiocarbon and other absolute methods place major construction and peak occupation between about 1100 and 1450. Earlier use appears by the 11th century in more modest forms. The rise is not explosive, it is cumulative, phase building on phase, technique on technique, until the great enclosure and the hill complex define a capital in stone. Map the space. The hill complex crowns granite heights and likely housed an elite. The great enclosure, with its sweeping arc and internal passages, reads as a ceremonial and political stage. Peripheral settlements spread out, dense with domestic debris. The layout speaks of hierarchy, of movement controlled and status displayed, of people who knew where they could and could not go. Open the midden. Pottery is local in make and motif, useful for sequence and identity. Then the imports appear. Glass beads trace back to India and the Middle East. Chinese porcelain, from Song to Ming horizons, lies broken but eloquent. Coils of trade reached inland from coastal towns like Sofala and linked Great Zimbabwe to an oceanic economy. Exotic objects do not announce foreign builders. They mark a successful market. Listen outward. Early Arabic and Persian accounts of the East African coast describe gold and ivory from interior polities. Portuguese writers of the 16th and early 17th centuries name a powerful inland kingdom Mutapa, and they mention a city of stone without mortar. The geographies blur, the spellings shift, but these texts anchor the antiquity and reputation of stone capitals inland before colonial eyes arrived. Listen inward. Traditions recorded among Karanga-speaking Shona tie royal residence, ritual, and stone houses together. The term Zimbabwe, from Zimbabwe, houses of stone, is not an antiquarian label. It is a local lexicon for power and place. The association of sacred leadership with elevated granite and enclosed space fits the site's vertical drama. Lift the artifacts. Iron and copper work is present in slag and tools. Agriculture leaves its seeds in the soil, sorghum and millet among them. Bones of cattle and goats tell of herds and feasts. Terraces and channels sketch water management. The economy is mixed and resilient, capable of supporting labor on the walls and tribute into the leader's store. Now the birds. 8 steatite sculptures from the hill complex depict raptors abstracted into emblems. Interpretations vary, but consensus holds their link to dynastic authority, to totems, to ancestors. Set a stone bird on a platform, and you turn a courtyard into a shrine. Set it above the capital, and you turn a leader into a lineage. Across the plateau, other centers rise with their own stonework, Kami among them. The style continues, the political center shifts. This is not a single city-state in isolation. It is a culture with capitals that move and traditions that persist. From rock to ritual to reach, the evidence now aligns on the builders. They were the ancestors of today's Shona, likely Karanga elites at the core of the polity often called the Zimbabwe state. They controlled labor and movement, mediated exchange with the coast, and turned architecture into the grammar of authority. It seems clear, almost. Pull at the thread of certainty. The conical tower inside the great enclosure looks practical at first glance, like a granary. But there is no internal access. Stones rise to seal a symbol, not to store a harvest. Its meaning is argued. Fertility for the land, abundance for the court, a beacon of lineage. The monument does not yield a single, simple function. Consider the record itself. Early 20th century clearances under Richard Nicklin Hall destroyed stratigraphy that could have fixed sequences and associations. Some questions today are harder not because the past is opaque, but because parts of the archive were scraped away. Interpretations must work around losses. Then there is governance without a ledger. No indigenous written administration survives from Great Zimbabwe. Models range from a strongly centralized kingship to a looser confederation of allied leaders. The architecture implies hierarchy. The trade goods imply coordinated control, yet the precise distribution of across clans and regions remains under debate. Zoom out to the network. Sites like Do-Do and Nailtail show continuity, and also change in pattern and emphasis. A culture persists even as capitals shift. That complicates any rigid diagram of authority drawn at a single moment. These complications do not knock the argument down. They force it to be honest. The walls can tell us who, and broadly how. On the what, in terms of exact offices and rights. They speak in symbols that resist a single translation. The pressure now is to see what breaks, and what holds, when the stones meet time. Mid-15th century, the capital's hold loosens. Great Zimbabwe declines. The reasons assemble like clouds rather than a single storm. Local resources may have strained, especially wood for fuel in metallurgy. Fields and pastures may have thinned under pressure. Trade routes along the coast may have shifted, altering inland leverage. Internal rivalries could have mattered too. Power migrates. North and west, the Mutapa state rises, also called Monomotapa in Portuguese accounts. To the southwest, the Chongamire or Rosvi domain grows. Dry stone architecture continues, but the capital's name changes. Kami flourishes with walls of own. Dodo and Nailtail add their courses. The culture bends, not breaks. At the coast, new visitors arrive. Late 15th century Portuguese navigators pry into Indian Ocean circuits that had long linked Africa to Asia. That attention will eventually rewrite commerce and conflict on the seaboard, and by extension, reshape leverage inland. The plateau speaks to new ears. Centuries later, the site becomes a battleground of a different sort. In colonial Rhodesia, myths of foreign builders prop up foreign rule. Trenches harm as much as they reveal. Indigenous authorship is dismissed despite work by Randall Meekiver and Caden Thompson. The stakes are not only scholarly, they are political. In 1980, independence resets the lens. The nation takes its name from the stone, Zimbabwe from Zimbabwe. The stone bird becomes a national emblem. In 1986, Great Zimbabwe enters the UNESCO list. Preservation and research realign. The walls move from a symbol misused to a heritage reclaimed. The final question tightens. With evidence reassembled, can we now say who built these walls and how their society was ordered? And close the door on the colonial story without closing our eyes to complexity? Return to the hill and the porcelain shard. Imports in the soil do not foreign masons. They mark a market that reached across the ocean, through ports like Sofala, into a capital whose builders spoke local languages and shaped local stone. Radiocarbon frames the rise between 1100 and 1450. Masonry styles climb in refinement. The hill complex and grade enclosure encode hierarchy. The stone birds fix sacred authority in place. Oral traditions in the very word Zimbabwe. Houses of stone tie polity and granite together. Early Portuguese writers record a stone city inland before the colonial gaze. Put the pieces together. The builders were the ancestors of the Shona, with Karanga elites likely at the helm. Their organization combined sacred leadership with the capacity to marshal labor, to direct movement, and to broker long-distance exchange. The foreign builder myth collapses under the weight of stone, soil, and speech. There's no ledger of titles, no manual for the rights, and some functions, like the conical towers, remain symbolic rather than mechanical. That is the honest margin, but the core picture holds, clear and local. Where writing is scarce, architecture becomes the archive. At Great Zimbabwe, walls record power by how they curve, who they enclose, and what they overlook. Imports whisper relationships, not origins. Oral memory supplies meanings that fit the ground beneath the feet. The deeper lesson is methodological. Strip ideology from evidence, and complexity returns to where it was denied. A capital without a script can still organize labor, manage trade, and project authority across a landscape. The proof is in granite, not in ink. Stand again under the granite courses, where a steatite bird once watched the city. In the dust, a blue-white shard of porcelain catches sunlight, a guest who came by sea. The walls do not speak a foreign tongue. They speak Shona in stone, and they are still standing. Welcome to Mysteria Mundi.